What is the sound of the perfect life shattering? It's not a dramatic crash. Sometimes it's the sound of a millionaire's careless laughter echoing through a steam-filled spa, the sound of champagne glasses clinking in a toast to a secret love. For Adrian Beaumont, he had it all: a 9-figure net worth, a beautiful wife, and a stunning mistress. But he forgot one thing. A woman's silence is not weakness, it's a strategy. And on this perfect sunny afternoon, his pregnant wife Chloe was about to show him that the empire he built was a house of cards, and she was holding the one card that could bring it all down. The Bel Air mansion was an ode to glass steel and manufactured serenity. Water flowed down a 2-story textured stone wall in the entryway, the sound engineered to be soothing, not distracting. From the infinity pool, you could see the hazy silhouette of the downtown skyline, a kingdom Adrian Beaumont was convinced he had conquered. To the world, and to the fawning profiles in Forbes and Robb Report, Adrian was a titan of tech investment, a self-made man with a Midas touch and a life to match. His wife, Chloe Beaumont, was the perfect accessory to that life. Elegant, poised, with a quiet grace that spoke of old money, she was the beautiful, stable bedrock upon which Adrian had built his public image. She chaired the right charities, hosted the most sought-after dinner parties, and looked breathtaking in the couture gowns he bought her. She was in every sense of the word the perfect millionaire's wife. Lately, however, the gilded cage had begun to feel less like a home and more like a beautifully appointed prison. The first sign was subtle, a nagging unease that settled in her bones. It was the way Adrian's phone, once left carelessly on the marble countertop, was now perpetually in his pocket or face down. It was the late-night board meetings that stretched until 2 a.m., from which he'd return, smelling not of stale coffee and desperation, but of a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. It was the credit card statements she, as the manager of their household accounts, was privy to. A charge for 2 at Nobu Malibu on a night he was supposedly in a solo conference call. A staggering bill from a lingerie boutique on Rodeo Drive for items she would never wear. Chloe wasn't a fool. She had been raised by a father who navigated the treacherous waters of corporate law, a man who taught her to see the subtext in every conversation, the truth behind every polished lie. But she loved Adrian, or at least she loved the man he had been when they first met. The ambitious, hungry innovator with fire in his eyes who saw her not as a socialite, but as his partner. The memory of that man kept her quiet, hoping she was wrong, hoping it was just the stress of a new hostile takeover bid he was orchestrating. Then came the second sign, the one that changed everything. It wasn't a lipstick stain or a stray text message. It was a wave of nausea one morning that sent her rushing to the bathroom, a sudden exhaustion that felt bone-deep, and a calendar that told an undeniable truth. A discreet visit to Dr. Alistair Finch on Park Avenue confirmed it. She was pregnant. For a fleeting moment, joy erupted in her chest, pure and brilliant. They had talked about children for years, a vague, future-tense conversation that Adrian always steered away from with a casual soon baby when things are less crazy. Now, it was real. This, she thought, would be their anchor. This would fix the growing chasm between them. She planned a special dinner, his favorite pan-seared scallops, and a vintage bottle of Montrachet. He arrived late, distracted, kissing her on the cheek, with the detached air of a busy executive. "Big news, darling," she'd said, her hands trembling slightly as she held his. He loosened his tie, his eyes already drifting towards the stock market ticker on the television. Did the catering for the hospital gala come through No, Adrian. Bigger. She took a deep breath. We're pregnant. The reaction wasn't what she had dreamed of. There was no whoop of joy, no tearful embrace. A flicker of something unreadable. Was it panic? Annoyance crossed his face before being expertly smoothed away. He manufactured a smile, wide and white. Pregnant, wow. Wow, Chloe, that's fantastic news. He squeezed her hand, a perfunctory gesture. Are you sure? Yes, I saw Dr. Finch today. I'm almost 3 months along. 3 months, and you're just telling me? The question was sharp, an accusation disguised as concern. I wanted to be sure, she said, her own smile faltering. Right. Of course. Well, this is great. A Beaumont heir. He raised his glass of whiskey. To the dynasty. The word hung in the air, dynasty. Not family, not our baby. It was another asset, another piece of his legacy. The chill that had been settling in her bones for months became a sheet of ice. That night, as he slept soundly beside her, Chloe slipped out of bed and went to his study. She had never invaded his privacy before, but the coldness of his reaction had extinguished the last embers of her hope. His laptop was password protected, but she knew the sequence, the date of his first major acquisition. It was a testament to his priorities. The files were meticulously organized. Business, investments, household. And then a folder she had never seen before, innocuously labeled projects. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clicked it open. It wasn't full of spreadsheets or market analyses. It was full of photographs and videos. A woman stunningly beautiful with fiery auburn hair and a predatory smile was draped over Adrian. They were on a yacht in St. Bart's, laughing. They were in a suite at the George V in Paris, the Eiffel Tower sparkling behind them. They were at a private table in a dark, exclusive club, her hand high on his thigh. And there were receipts, a lease agreement for a penthouse apartment in Century City, a wire transfer confirmation for $50,000, the memo line reading "For my angel," a digital receipt for a Patek Philippe watch, a ladies' model purchased 2 weeks ago. The woman's name was on the lease agreement, Isabella Rossi. A quick shaking search on Instagram revealed a public profile filled with curated luxury. There she was wearing the watch. There she was posing in the penthouse with a caption that read, "Home is where the heart is. So grateful for my king." Chloe felt the world tilt on its axis. The nausea that rose in her throat had nothing to do with her pregnancy. This wasn't a fleeting mistake. This was a parallel life. Adrian hadn't just cheated. He had built a second secret world with this woman, funded by their shared fortune. The trips, the gifts, the apartment, it was a staggering betrayal, a second family built on a foundation of lies. She sank into his leather chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the tears streaming down her face. But as the initial shock subsided, something else began to crystallize in its place. It was a cold, hard fury. The love for the man he'd been died in that moment, replaced by a steely resolve. He had called their child a part of his dynasty. He had no idea how right he was. This child, her child, would not be raised in the shadow of this deceit. She didn't just want a divorce. She wanted justice. Over the next 2 weeks, Chloe operated with the precision of a seasoned general. She was still the perfect wife, smiling placidly at breakfast, asking about his day, feigning a gentle, pregnancy-induced fatigue. But while Adrian was at his meetings, Chloe was meeting with her own team. She didn't go to a flashy Hollywood divorce attorney. She went to Eleanor Vance, a discreet but legendary lawyer her father had once called a shark in a Chanel suit. In Eleanor's quiet, book-lined office, Chloe laid out everything. She had downloaded every photo, every receipt, every wire transfer. She had cross-referenced the dates with Adrian's calendar, creating an undeniable timeline of his infidelity. Eleanor, a woman in her 60s with piercing blue eyes, listened without interruption. When Chloe was finished, she didn't offer platitudes or condolences. She offered a strategy. Infidelity in California is not a factor in the division of assets, Eleanor stated, her voice calm and even. It's a no-fault state. However, the misappropriation of community funds to support an extramarital affair is another matter entirely. The apartment, the gifts, the travel that's marital money, he has squandered. We can get that back, and then some. But we need more. More, Chloe asked, her voice quiet. He underestimates you, Chloe. That's our greatest weapon. He sees you as a decoration. While he's busy with his project, we will conduct a full forensic accounting of Beaumont Capital. We'll find out if he's been as reckless with his business as he has been with his marriage. The plan was set. For the next month, while a team of accountants Eleanor hired began to secretly dissect Adrian's empire, Chloe played her part. The hardest moments were when he would place a hand on her growing belly, a proprietary smug look on his face. "Gotta take care of my legacy," he'd say. And Chloe would smile, a sweet, vacant smile, while a storm of ice and fire raged within her. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unlikely source. One of Adrian's junior analysts, a young man Chloe had been kind to at a company Christmas party, reached out to her. He was being squeezed out by Adrian for questioning some ethically dubious fund transfers. He had proof that Adrian was co-mingling personal and investor funds, a cardinal sin in the financial world. That was the kill shot. Eleanor Vance's eyes lit up when Chloe presented the information. The divorce papers were drawn up not just as a dissolution of a marriage, but as the opening salvo in a war that would threaten to dismantle everything Adrian had built. "Now," Eleanor said, sliding the thick stack of documents across her polished mahogany desk, "we need to serve him. We could have a process server do it at his office. It would be effective." Chloe looked down at the papers, her name printed next to his on the top line. A lifetime of betrayal condensed into cold legal text. She thought of his laughter in those videos with Isabella. She thought of his dismissive wave when she told him she was pregnant. She thought of him calling their child his legacy. A cold, clear vision formed in her mind. She didn't want him served by a stranger in an office. She wanted to see his face. She wanted him to be at his happiest, at his most arrogant, when his world came crashing down. "No, Chloe," said her voice devoid of any tremor. "I know where he'll be this Saturday, and I'll deliver them myself." Isabella Rossi believed in the religion of ambition. Her temple was the reflection in the mirror, and her prayers were whispered affirmations of her own worth. She wasn't born into the world of luxury she now inhabited. She had clawed her way into it with manicured nails, a brilliant smile, and an almost sociopathic understanding of the male ego. To her, men like Adrian Beaumont were not partners. They were opportunities, stepping stones on a path to a life of permanent, unassailable security. Her penthouse in Century City was her sanctuary and her trophy case. The rent was astronomical, but Adrian paid it without a second thought. The closets were filled with designer clothes. He'd bought her the jewelry box, held the Patek Philippe he'd gifted her, and the view from the floor-to-ceiling windows was a constant reminder of how far she'd come from the cramped apartment in the valley she'd shared with two other aspiring actresses. Isabella was a student of her craft. Before she ever met Adrian, she had studied him. She read his interviews, learned about his business, and understood his vulnerabilities. He wasn't old money. He was a conqueror who needed his conquests validated. He craved adoration, not partnership. He wanted a woman who was a reflection of his success, dazzling, exotic, and entirely dependent on him. She played the part to perfection. With Adrian, she was never tired, never difficult, never anything but a vessel of pure, uncomplicated pleasure and admiration. She listened with rapt attention as he boasted about a corporate raid, her eyes wide with manufactured awe. She praised his genius, his ruthlessness, his vision. She made him feel like the king he so desperately wanted to be, a feeling he clearly wasn't getting from his Ice Queen wife, as he sometimes called Chloe in moments of drunken candor. "She's a good woman," he'd slur, swirling a ridiculously expensive cognac in his glass. "A good mother for my heir. Stable. That's the word. Like a well-managed bond. But you, Bella, you're the IPO. You're the explosion. The risk and the reward." Isabella would simply smile, tracing the rim of his glass with her finger. "She doesn't understand what it takes to be a man like you, Adrian." "I do." She knew about the pregnancy. Adrian had told her the day after Chloe's announcement, his tone a mixture of irritation and resignation. Isabella had performed her role flawlessly, her face falling into a mask of exquisite pain. "A baby," she'd whispered, her voice breaking artfully. "Oh, Adrian, what does this mean for us?" He had gathered her in his arms, stroking her hair. "It means nothing changes for us. This is you and me, Bella. The baby. It's a dynastic necessity. It secures the legacy. But you," he said, tilting her chin up, "you are my life. As soon as this takeover is complete, I'm going to start the process. I'll leave her. You and I will be together properly." It was the same promise he'd been making for 6 months, but the pregnancy added a new urgency to Isabella's timeline. A baby complicated things. It tied him to Chloe in a way that was permanent and, more importantly, financial. An heir could siphon off millions, diluting the fortune Isabella had come to see as rightfully hers. She had to accelerate her own plans. "You promise, Addie," she'd said, her eyes welling with crocodile tears, "because I don't think I can stand sharing you for much longer, especially now." "I promise," he'd said, his voice thick with a passion he reserved only for her. "I'm going to give you everything you deserve." This Saturday was a celebration of that promise. He had just closed the initial stage of the hostile takeover, a brutal, brilliant move that had netted his firm a controlling interest in a rival tech company. He was high on the victory, feeling invincible. "We're going to the peninsula," he'd told her on the phone, his voice buzzing with energy. "Couples massage, champagne by the rooftop pool. We'll celebrate us, my real partner in crime." Isabella chose her outfit with the care of a surgeon. A white string bikini that showcased her impossibly toned body, a sheer silk caftan that hinted at what was underneath, and oversized Chanel sunglasses that added an air of untouchable glamour. She was the fantasy, the escape, the living embodiment of everything his sterile life with Chloe was not. She met him in the private bungalow suite at the spa. The air was thick with the scent of eucalyptus and lavender. He was already there, a bottle of Dom Perignon on ice. He greeted her with a hungry kiss, his hands roaming her body with a sense of ownership she both encouraged and resented. "There's my goddess," he murmured against her neck. "Congratulations, my titan," she purred, holding his face in her hands. "You did it. I never doubted you for a second." The massages were a blissful blur of hot stones and fragrant oils. Afterward, Wrapped in plush white robes, they made their way to a secluded cabana by the rooftop pool. The California sun was a warm blanket, the sky a perfect, cloudless blue. From here, the city sprawled beneath them, a testament to power and wealth. Adrian was in his element, holding court for an audience of one. He recounted the details of his business victory, his voice loud and confident. He laughed, a booming, arrogant sound that made heads turn at the other cabanas. You should have seen their faces, Bella. The board of directors, they looked like they'd seen a ghost. We came in, cleaned house. It was brutal. It was beautiful. Isabella laughed with him, a tinkling musical sound that was as practiced as her smile. And Chloe, is she happy about the win? She asked a strategic, venom-laced question designed to remind him of the contrast between his two worlds. Adrian waved a dismissive hand. Chloe, please, she probably thinks a hostile takeover is a badly managed dinner party. She'll be happy about the stock price, that's all she understands. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She's been so tired lately. Moody, this pregnancy thing. It's a real drag, you know. All she does is sleep and talk about organic cotton for the nursery. He took a long sip of champagne, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. I come here with you and I feel alive. I go home and I feel like I'm visiting a museum. Isabella placed a perfectly manicured hand on his chest, her red nails a stark contrast to the white robe. Then maybe it's time to stop visiting the museum, darling. Soon, he said, kissing her fingers. Very soon. After this, nothing can stop us. His laughter boomed again, bouncing off the water of the pool. It was the sound of a man on top of the world, a man who believed he had bent reality to his will, a man who believed he could have his perfect wife, his perfect heir, and his perfect mistress, all coexisting in a universe of his own design. He was Adrian Beaumont, the invincible titan, laughing with his lover in the sun, utterly oblivious to the fact that his universe was seconds away from collapsing, and the architect of its destruction was walking towards him right now. He didn't see her at first. He was too engrossed in Isabella's adoring gaze, too wrapped up in the cocoon of his own ego. It was Isabella who stiffened, her smile freezing on her face. Her eyes, looking past Adrian's shoulder, widened almost imperceptibly. Adrian, she said, her voice a tight whisper. What is it, baby? He asked, annoyed at the interruption. He turned, following her gaze. And there, standing at the edge of their cabana, silhouetted against the bright blue sky, was a figure that didn't belong. It was Chloe. For a moment, Adrian's brain refused to process the image. It was like seeing a character from one movie wander onto the set of another. Chloe, his quiet, elegant, predictable Chloe, did not belong here. The spa was his world with Isabella. It was a sacrosanct space of fantasy and escape. Her presence was a violation, a glitch in the matrix of his carefully compartmentalized life. She wasn't dressed for a spa day. She wore a simple but exquisitely tailored navy blue maternity dress that did nothing to hide the gentle swell of her belly. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek chignon, and her face, devoid of makeup, was a mask of serene, unnerving calm. She held no purse. Her only accessory was a thick, cream-colored envelope clutched in one hand. The vibrant soundscape of the rooftop oasis seemed to mute itself. The soft lounge music, the gentle lapping of the water, the distant city hum. It all faded into a dull roar in Adrian's ears. The only sound he could truly hear was the frantic pounding of his own heart. He scrambled to his feet, pulling his robe tighter around himself as if it were a suit of armor. Chloe, what on earth are you doing here? His voice was a harsh croak, a clumsy attempt at authority that was immediately undermined by the sheer panic in his eyes. Chloe's gaze was fixed entirely on him. She didn't even glance at Isabella, who sat frozen on the chaise lounge, her face a pale, slack-jawed mask of shock. She had mentally rehearsed facing off against a screaming, crying, hysterical wife. This cold, silent apparition was something she had not prepared for. "I could ask you the same thing," Chloe replied, her voice steady and clear, carrying easily in the sudden silence. It was not the voice of a hysterical victim. It was the voice of a woman in complete control. "But I don't need to. I already know." Adrian's mind raced, cycling through a Rolodex of potential lies, excuses, and deflections. A business meeting, a chance encounter, but the sight of them wrapped in spa robes, champagne glasses in hand, rendered any lie absurd. He was caught, utterly and completely. "Now listen, Chloe, this isn't what it looks like," he began, the most pathetic and cliché of all defenses falling from his lips before he could stop it. Chloe took a slow, deliberate step forward, entering the shaded space of the cabana. The air grew thick, charged with unspoken history and imminent devastation. She finally allowed her eyes to drift towards Isabella, a quick, dismissive glance that was more insulting than any tirade. She took in the string bikini, the perfect body, the manufactured glamour. It was a look that said, "This is what you chose. This is what you thought was better." Isabella flinched as if she'd been struck. "Don't you dare speak to me, Adrian," Chloe said, her attention snapping back to her husband. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence by trying to lie your way out of this. Not anymore." She took another step, stopping directly in front of the small table that separated the two chaise lounges. With a calm, fluid motion, she placed the thick envelope on the table right next to the sweating bottle of Dom Perignon. The sound of the paper on the glass was a soft thud, but it echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Adrian stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. "What is that?" "It's the end of your dynasty," Chloe said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet laced with steel. "It's the end of us. It's the end of the illusion you've worked so hard to maintain." His eyes darted from the envelope to her face, searching for a crack in her composure, a hint of the tearful, broken woman he expected. He found none. He was looking at a stranger. With a trembling hand, he reached for the envelope. His arrogance, his confidence, his feeling of invincibility had evaporated under the relentless California sun, leaving behind a raw, exposed nerve of fear. He tore it open, his movements clumsy. He pulled out the thick stack of papers. The top page was a summons. His eyes scanned the legal jargon, but one phrase leaped out at him, seared into his brain: "Petition for dissolution of marriage." And below it, the names: petitioner Chloe Beaumont, respondent Adrian Beaumont. He felt the blood drain from his face. A wave of dizziness washed over him. He stumbled back, sinking onto the edge of his chaise lounge. "Divorce," he whispered the word, sounding foreign and absurd. "Chloe, you can't be serious. We're having a baby. You're emotional. It's the hormones." A single sharp laugh escaped Chloe's lips. It was a sound devoid of any humor, a brittle, sharp shard of sound. "The hormones. You stand here half-naked with your mistress after I discovered you've been funding her entire life with our money for over a year, and you want to blame my hormones." She gestured towards Isabella. "Did you use our money to pay for her apartment, Adrian, for her watches, for her trips to Paris? Did you think I was just a stupid decorative doll who wouldn't notice $500,000 missing from our accounts?" Adrian was speechless. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. the forensic accounting. She knew everything. Isabella, seeing her fantasy life crumbling before her eyes, finally found her voice. "He loves me," she shrieked, rising to her feet and clutching her own robe around her. "He was going to leave you." Chloe turned her head slowly to face her. "He was never going to leave me," she said, her voice dripping with pity and contempt. "Men like Adrian don't leave their wives. They just acquire new hobbies. You were a hobby, Isabella, an expensive, depreciating asset, and your value just plummeted to zero." She then turned her gaze back to her husband, who was frantically flipping through the pages, his face growing paler with every sheet he read. He saw the exhibits copies of the wire transfers, the lease agreement, the photographs. It was all there, a meticulously compiled dossier of his betrayal. This is insane," he stammered. "We can talk about this. We can work this out. I'll end it with her. Right now. It's over." He looked at Isabella with cold, dead eyes. "Get out." Isabella stared at him, her mouth agape. "What, Adrian, you promised me? Get out," he roared, his voice cracking with desperation. But Chloe just shook her head slowly, a sad final smile touching her lips. "Oh, Adrian, you still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. This isn't me giving you an ultimatum." She placed a hand on her own stomach, a gesture of both protection and power. "This is a notification. You and I are finished. Your life as you know it is over. I suggest you read the rest of that petition very carefully, especially the part about the forensic audit of Beaumont Capital and the motion to freeze your assets pending the investigation into fraudulent use of investor funds." Adrian froze the papers, trembling in his hand. Fraudulent use of investor funds. The words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. It was his deepest, darkest secret, the line he had crossed, to fund his meteoric rise. He looked up at her, and for the first time, he saw her. Not the quiet wife, not the socialite, not the mother of his heir. He saw the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing. He saw the woman whose family money had provided the seed capital for his first venture, a fact he had conveniently erased from his self-made narrative. And he saw the woman who was now going to take it all away. "Chloe, please," he begged, the last vestiges of his pride dissolving into sheer terror. "Don't do this. The papers are filed, Adrian," she said, her voice softening, not with pity, but with the quiet finality of a chapter closing. "Eleanor Vance will be in touch with your lawyer, if you even have one, who will take your case after this." Without another word, she turned and walked away. Her posture was perfect, her steps even and unhurried. She didn't look back. She walked past the stunned onlookers, through the hushed spa lobby, and out into the bright sunlight, leaving the smoldering wreckage of her husband's life behind her. Adrian Beaumont, the titan of tech, sat in his bathrobe, holding the ruins of his world in his hands. The champagne was getting warm. His mistress was staring at him with undisguised hatred, and the booming, confident laughter that had echoed across the pool just minutes before was gone, replaced by a suffocating, terrifying silence. The silence Chloe left in her wake was a living entity. It pressed in on Adrian, heavy and suffocating. For a full minute, he just sat there, the legal documents a dead weight in his lap. His world had been moving at 1,000 miles per hour, and she had just slammed on the brakes, sending him crashing through the windshield of his own reality. Then, the silence was shattered. Fraudulent use of investor funds. Isabella's voice was shrill, laced with a panic that had nothing to do with lost love and everything to do with lost revenue. What the hell was she talking about? Adrian freeze, your assets? What does that mean for me? For the penthouse? For everything you promised me? Adrian looked up at her, but he didn't truly see her. He saw the embodiment of his own catastrophic stupidity. The beautiful, thrilling distraction had just become Exhibit A in the trial of his downfall. The $50,000 wire transfers, the lease he co-signed, the credit card bills, it was a paper trail leading directly to his ruin. "Shut up, Isabella," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "Just shut up." "Don't you tell me to shut up," she shrieked, her carefully constructed mask of glamour cracking to reveal the raw, grasping desperation beneath. "You told me you were a god. You told me you were untouchable. You swore to me that woman was nothing but a placeholder, and you believed me." Adrian snapped back, a bitter self-loathing anger rising in him. "You thought this was a fairy tale. You knew exactly what this was. It was a transaction. And the deal is now off." "A transaction," she spat, her face contorted with fury. "I gave you the best year of my life. I worshipped you, and for what, to be left with nothing while your little pregnant wife takes you to the cleaners. Oh no, 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 no. You are going to pay me what you owe me. The ring you promised, the security." Adrian threw the divorce papers onto the chaise lounge and stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. "There is no me and you. There is no ring, there is nothing. Don't you understand? It's over, everything. Now get your things and get out of my sight. The lease on that penthouse will be terminated by the end of the day." The color drained from Isabella's face. The fight went out of her, replaced by the cold, hard terror of a con artist whose mark has just gone bankrupt. Without another word, she turned, snatched her designer handbag, and stormed away, her bare feet slapping angrily against the hot stone tiles. She didn't look back. Like a predator sensing a dying animal, she knew it was time to abandon the carcass and search for new prey. Left alone in the cabana, Adrian finally collapsed. He buried his face in his hands, his body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. He tried to call Chloe. The call went straight to voicemail, her familiar gentle voice on the recording now sounding like a cruel taunt. He tried again. Voicemail. He sent a flurry of desperate texts. "Chloe, please, we need to talk. This is a mistake. I love you. I'll do anything. Fire everyone. Sell the company. Just please call me." The three small dots indicating she was typing appeared, and his heart leaped with a desperate hope. Then they vanished. A moment later, a single sterile message appeared, blocked. He then called his lawyer, Arthur Chen, a man whose primary job was to make problems disappear. "Arthur, we have a problem." "A big one," Adrian said, his voice ragged. "Chloe served me divorce papers." There was a pause on the other end. "Okay, Adrian. It's unpleasant but manageable. We'll respond. Start negotiations." "No, you don't understand." Adrian cut in, his voice rising in panic. "She has Eleanor Vance, and she knows Arthur. She knows about the co-mingling. She mentioned freezing my assets. She has proof." The line went silent for a very long time. When Arthur finally spoke, his calm corporate voice was gone, replaced by a new grave tone. "Adrian, do not say another word on this phone. Do not text anyone. Do not email anyone. Go home, get your passport, and wait for me. We are no longer in damage control. We are in survival mode." The drive back to the Bel Air mansion was a surreal nightmare. The city he had viewed as his kingdom just an hour before now felt alien and hostile. Every traffic light seemed like a judgment, every skyscraper a silent witness to his hubris. When he walked through the massive front door, the house was eerily silent. The soothing sound of the water wall now seemed to mock him. He called out Chloe's name, but only the echo answered. He walked through the cavernous rooms. On their bed, the indentation of her head was still on her pillow, but her closet was half empty. Her jewelry box was gone. The personal photographs of her family on the mantelpiece had vanished. She had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. Her quietness, her fatigue, her gentle smiles, it hadn't been weakness or distraction. It had been a strategy. She had been observing, gathering, and planning his execution while he was whining and dining her replacement. He hadn't just underestimated her, he had failed to see her at all. Over the next 48 hours, Adrian's world unraveled with breathtaking speed. The motion to freeze his assets was granted by an emergency judge, citing the overwhelming evidence of his intent to defraud his wife and potentially his investors. His bank accounts were locked. His corporate credit cards were declined. The news hit the financial wire services on Monday morning. Beaumont Capital founder Adrian Beaumont sued for divorce, accused of fraud. His phone exploded. Investors, board members, journalists, everyone wanted a piece of him. His board of directors called an emergency meeting and demanded his immediate resignation as CEO. His partner's men, he had made millions with, refused to even take his call. The empire he had built on charisma and fear crumbled in less than 2 business days because the foundation of trust was gone. The most humiliating blow came from a source he never anticipated. Part of the evidence Chloe and Eleanor had submitted was an analysis of Beaumont Capital's origins. It proved with bank statements and legal documents from over a decade ago that the initial $2 million seed investment that launched his first successful fund had not come from a syndicate of angel investors, as he had always claimed in his myth-making interviews. It had come directly from a trust controlled by Chloe's father, a quiet, pre-marital investment to help his future son-in-law get on his feet. The self-made man was a fraud, built on the money of the very family he had betrayed. The story was irresistible to the press. He was no longer a fallen titan, he was a pathetic grifter. Forced out of his own company and locked out of his own fortune, Adrian was adrift. He was forced to move out of the Bel Air mansion and into a sterile corporate apartment paid for by the pittance the court allowed him for living expenses. The Rolls-Royce was repossessed. The endless stream of sycophants and admirers vanished overnight. He was left with nothing but his own echoing thoughts and the crushing weight of his arrogance. He spent his days in a haze of fury and disbelief, pacing the small apartment like a caged animal. He replayed the scene at the spa over and over in his mind. He saw Chloe's calm, determined face, heard her steady voice delivering his death sentence. How had he missed it? How had he been so blind to the steel that lay beneath her soft exterior? He had seen her as a beautiful, passive part of his life's portfolio, an asset that provided stability and social grace. He had never once considered that she was the one person in the world who had the power to burn it all to the ground. He had handed her the matches and the gasoline and then laughed while she built the pyre right under his feet. He had thought he was the king, but he had only ever been the court jester in her quiet, patient tragedy. And the final act was about to begin. The deposition room was cold and impersonal, a beige box designed to strip away all pretense. Adrian sat at one end of the long mahogany table, flanked by a shell-shocked Arthur Chen. He looked like a shadow of his former self. The bespoke suits had been replaced by a rumpled off-the-rack shirt. His face was pale and unshaven, and the confident swagger was gone, replaced by a haunted, hunted look in his eyes. Across from him sat Eleanor Vance, radiating an aura of calm, predatory power. Next to her was Chloe. If Adrian looked diminished, Chloe looked luminous. Pregnancy agreed with her. Her skin glowed and her eyes, clear and focused, held a strength that seemed to draw from an infinite well. She wore a simple, cream-colored dress, her hand resting almost constantly on her belly. The sight of her so serene and powerful in the wreckage of his life was a fresh torment for Adrian. "Let's begin," Eleanor said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. Beaumont, let's talk about the initial capitalization of Beaumont Capital. In numerous public interviews, you've described yourself as a self-made man. Could you please recount for us the story of how you secured your initial seed funding?" Arthur Chen shifted uncomfortably. "Objection. Relevance. It's highly relevant, counsel," Eleanor countered smoothly, "as it pertains to the fraudulent misrepresentation of assets from the very inception of the marital estate. I'll ask again, Mr. Beaumont. Tell us about the syndicate of angel investors." Adrian's jaw tightened. He glared at Chloe, who met his gaze without flinching. "I secured funding from various private sources." He mumbled the lie, tasting like ash in his mouth. Eleanor smiled a thin, dangerous smile. "Is it not true, Mr. Beaumont, that on May the 14th, 10 years ago, a single wire transfer of $2 million was made from the Sterling Family Trust to your newly formed LLC, a trust of which your then-fiancée, Chloe Sterling, was the primary beneficiary?" She slid a bank statement across the table. Adrian didn't have to look at it. The numbers were burned into his memory. It was the day his life had truly begun, a day he had long since rewritten in his own personal history. "It was a loan," he stammered, "a loan for which there is no promissory note, no repayment schedule, and no record of any interest ever being paid." Eleanor said, her voice like chipping ice. "It looks for all legal purposes like a gift from Chloe's family to you, which would mean that the very foundation of the empire you claim to have built by yourself is in fact community property seeded by your wife's premarital wealth." Arthur Chen put his head in his hands. It was over. They weren't just arguing over the division of assets acquired during the marriage. Eleanor was arguing that the entire company was in essence a joint venture from day one. But that wasn't the twist. The real twist, the one that would break him completely, came next. "Now let's move on to the child," Eleanor said, her tone softening slightly as she glanced at Chloe. "Mr. Beaumont, you are aware that my client, your wife, is pregnant." "Of course," Adrian said, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. The baby, his heir, that was his one remaining link, his one piece of leverage. "My son, my legacy." "Your legacy," Eleanor repeated, tasting the word. "You've expressed your eagerness to be involved in the child's life, and you are, of course, prepared to provide for him financially." "I'll provide for my son whatever it takes," Adrian said, trying to sound noble. Chloe, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "He won't be needing your provision, Adrian." Adrian frowned. "What are you talking about? He's a Beaumont. He's my son." Chloe looked directly at him, and her expression was not one of anger or triumph, but of something akin to pity. "No, Adrian, he's not." The air in the room seemed to crystallize. Adrian stared at her, his mind struggling to comprehend the words. Arthur Chen's head snapped up. "What?" Adrian whispered. "The baby," Chloe said, her voice perfectly even, "is not yours." "That's impossible." He choked out, his face turning a blotchy red. "You're lying. It's a trick. A desperate, pathetic trick." He turned to his lawyer. "She's lying. Arthur, tell them she's lying." Eleanor Vance slid another document across the table. It was a notarized report from a genetics lab dated 2 weeks prior. Attached to it was a sworn affidavit from Chloe. "My client," Eleanor explained calmly, "underwent an amniocentesis for medical reasons. As part of that process, a paternity test was conducted. The results are conclusive. You, Mr. Beaumont, are not the biological father." Adrian snatched the paper, his hands shaking so violently he could barely read it. He scanned the technical data, the probabilities and genetic markers until he found the conclusion written in stark, unambiguous text. "The alleged father, Adrian Beaumont, is excluded as the biological father of the male fetus." He felt the world dissolve into a roaring inferno. The last pillar of his identity, the one thing he thought was his heir, his dynasty, crumbled into dust. This final profound humiliation was too much to bear. "Who?" he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The sound echoed his own breaking spirit. "Who is it? After all this hypocrisy, you had an affair." Chloe did not flinch from his rage. She met it with the same unnerving calm. "There was no affair," she said simply. "Our marriage was over long before I met him. It was over the day I found the receipts for Isabella. I was just going through the motions. We were separated in every way that mattered." "Who is he?" Adrian demanded, again his voice cracking. "His name is Dr. Ben Carter," Chloe said. "He's a pediatrician I met through my charity work at the Children's Hospital. He's kind, and he's decent, and he's honest. He's everything you are not. When you were flying to Paris with Isabella, I was having coffee with Ben. When you were buying her watches, I was having dinner with a man who was interested in my thoughts, not my trust fund. When you left me alone for weeks on end, I found comfort in the company of a good man who made me feel seen for the first time in years." She finally let a single perfect tear trace a path down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of release. "The baby wasn't planned," she continued softly. "But he is not a mistake. He is the best thing to ever happen to me. He is my new beginning. He is a Sterling, not a Beaumont. And he will have nothing to do with you or your toxic legacy." Adrian stared at her, his mind a maelstrom of rage, jealousy, and utter defeat. He had been so consumed by his own deceptions, so blinded by his arrogance, that he had never even considered that she could have a life, a heart, a secret of her own. He had treated her as a possession, and she had responded by finding a life where she was a person. He had lost everything, his company, his fortune, his wife. And now he had lost a son he never even knew wasn't his. He had been fighting for a ghost, a legacy that was never meant for him. He pushed his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor, and stumbled out of the room without another word. The fight was gone. The reckoning was complete. He was no longer Adrian Beaumont the Titan. He was just a man who had burned down his own kingdom for a fantasy, only to discover the real treasure had walked out the door and built a new life without him. 1 year later, the California sun felt different. It was no longer a harsh spotlight exposing a life of lies, but a warm, gentle presence. Chloe sat on a blanket in the shade of a large oak tree in a public park in Pasadena, a world away from the sterile grandeur of Bel Air. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and laughter. In her arms, 6-month-old Leo gurgled happily, his chubby fingers grabbing at a stray strand of her hair. He had her eyes, but he had a smile that was all his own, a pure, unadulterated expression of joy. He was her world. Dr. Ben Carter sat beside them, expertly assembling a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, cutting the crusts off with the precision of a surgeon. He was a man defined by a quiet competence and a deep well of kindness. His love for Chloe was not a loud proclamation, but a series of steady, consistent actions, the way he'd hold Leo so Chloe could have a break, the way he listened to her, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. It wasn't the apocalyptic legal war Adrian had feared. After the revelation in the deposition room, he had completely collapsed. Stripped of his company, his wife and the heir he thought was his Adrian's fight was gone. He accepted a settlement that was by Eleanor Vance's standards generous. He was left with a few $1,000,000 enough to live comfortably, but not enough to ever reclaim the power he once wielded. He was a footnote in the financial pages, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Chloe had heard from a mutual acquaintance that he had moved to Arizona trying to start a small consulting firm, a ghost haunting the edges of the world he once dominated. Isabella Rossi had vanished, as Chloe knew she would. Her Instagram had been scrubbed of all traces of Adrian. New pictures had appeared with a different, older, but equally wealthy man, this time on a yacht in the Mediterranean. She was a predator who had moved on to fresher kills, leaving the past behind without a second thought. Chloe, on the other hand, had used her freedom to build a life, not just an image. The settlement, combined with her own family's wealth, had left her independently wealthy beyond measure. But she hadn't returned to the world of galas and couture. She had sold the Bel Air mansion, the proceeds of which she used to establish the Leo Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing elite medical care for underprivileged children, with Ben serving on the board of directors. She bought a beautiful, comfortable home in a quiet, family-friendly neighborhood, a place with a garden and a swing set, not an infinity pool and a water wall. Her life was no longer about performance. It was about presence. It was about being present for her son, for Ben, for herself. "Here you go," Ben said, handing her half of the sandwich. "A culinary masterpiece." Chloe smiled, a genuine, easy smile that reached her eyes. "You're a lifesaver." "Just paying my dues to the CEO," he teased. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Leo discover his own feat with wide-eyed wonder. It was a simple, perfect moment, worth more than all the diamonds and private jets in the world. "Did you hear back from the city about the new clinic space?" Ben asked. "Eleanor is handling the final paperwork," Chloe said. "She still calls to check in on me. I think she's more invested in Leo's future than my own father." "She saw you through the fire," Ben said, his voice soft. "She knows how strong you are." Chloe looked down at her son. The fire. It felt like a lifetime ago. She remembered the cold fury, the meticulous planning, the icy calm she had felt walking into that spa. She had been a woman forged in the crucible of betrayal, and she had emerged not scarred, but tempered. She had done what she had to do, not for revenge, but for survival. For Leo. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the only way to build a new life is to burn the old one to the ground. She had walked out of the ashes, not alone, but with the future, cradled in her arms. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the park, Ben put his arm around her. Leo leaned his head against her chest, his breathing soft and even as he drifted to sleep. Chloe rested her head on Ben's shoulder, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She had once been Mrs. Adrian Beaumont, the perfect accessory to a hollow dynasty. Now, she was just Chloe, a mother, a philanthropist, a partner to a good man. She was free, and in the quiet, happy rhythm of her new life, she had found a wealth that could never be measured on a balance sheet. From the pristine facade of a Bel Air mansion to a sun-drenched park, Chloe Beaumont's journey shows us that true strength isn't about the life you project, but the one you have the courage to build for yourself. She transformed the deepest betrayal into a catalyst for an authentic new beginning, proving that the most powerful empires are not built of glass and steel, but of resilience, integrity, and love. Her story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to walk away from a gilded cage and find your own sky. If Chloe's story of resilience and reclaiming her power resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more dramatic stories of justice reckoning and incredible new beginnings. Thank you for watching.